Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Well, welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. You know, when COVID hit, we all had to move to remote learning. But Jerry, you started a virtual school well before that, didn't you? When was that?
Right. I started the Kansas Online Learning Program in 2010. So 10 years prior to COVID. But I know that I was not the one that paved the way for that. There were others. And our guest today is one of them. And Jamie, I have to say, when we talk about breaking boundaries, our guest today, Dr. Brent Goldman, is just the kind of guest we love to have, someone that is truly breaking boundaries and has been doing it for years. He has been doing so many innovative things and has been recognized nationally for his efforts to really innovate education. And so, Dr. Brent Goldman, we are so happy to have you here today on the LinkedUp podcast, and we're excited to pick your brain and hear about the innovative things that you have done.
Sounds good. I'm excited to be here as well. Thank you.
Yes. So we read in your bio, you left public education 26 years ago?
I did, which is hard to believe. I started my first year teaching. I was a fifth grade dropout prevention teacher, which is kind of hard to believe. And that kind of got me going on the notion that maybe there's something wrong with our system. And then I taught 5 years of high school social studies before I embarked on my kind of educational entrepreneur career over the past 26 years.
And so I would think teaching fifth graders that are at risk to drop out of school, is that the group you had?
But yeah, they were labeled at age 10 to be potential dropouts, which was kind of incredible. At the time I got the job here in South Florida, there was a hiring freeze. There was a shortage, they weren't hiring new teachers. And now it's obviously very different. So I took whatever job I can get. It was a tremendous experience. And kind of at a very early age, started framing my educational philosophy that maybe there's something wrong with what's going on in our system.
It gave you a special lens, I guess, to see, what works really well and what really we're struggling with in education. So that was your motivation to branch out. And how did you get the courage to do that, I guess, first? And then, we know your motivation. And then how did you begin that? And what was that process like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my mother owned childcare centers, and she had 5 of them in South Florida. One of them in a new community called Weston. It's not so new anymore. And the developers went to her to say, we need a private school. Would you be interested in starting one? And at that time, I was finishing my doctorate in education and looking for administrative jobs in the public school system. And this opportunity arose, and I was 26 and young and crazy. And, why not? Not knowing how crazy it truly was. And we started a K-5 private school, college prep that turned into a K-12 private school. And we grew it from, 0 kids in 1996 to when I left in 2016 to over 800. So that was the beginning, and inspired by my mother and being young and not knowing any better. It was probably I had the
helps.
The guts
that helps.
There's no doubt. Not married, not having kids, not worried about the safety net of a safe job. You're able to do that. But then I got the bug. once you get the entrepreneurial bug, you tend to do it again and again. And we started which was at the time the first SACS accredited online high school in 2002. We partnered with the University of Miami, and eventually that was acquired by the Washington Post and Kaplan in 2007. And today that is K-12, which is a very, very large public company. So what we started is now a part of the K-12 family, which is pretty wild. And then we also were a part of a group that started an online school in 2009 called Smart Horizons Career Online Education, which is an online high school geared towards adult high school dropouts. And we've had about 10,000 graduates over the years. We're in public libraries all over the United States. We're McDonald's High School. So that's the very cool, fulfilling company that we started. And then we started Xceed Preparatory Academy in 2016, which is our current venture, which is hybrid blended learning schools, mostly in Florida, but also in other locations, as well as a virtual school. So yeah, my mother inspired me many, many years ago, and then we've taken it to all kinds of levels along the way. But the common theme with everything that we've done is, kind of bleeding edge educational options that were kind of ahead of the time. And, we're proud of doing that.
You identified some issues with education, and that was your motivation. What specifically were some of those issues, and have you seen a change in those over time at all?
Yeah. So when I taught social studies in a very large, very good public school, right away I noticed something. I was teaching regular kids, schools track regular honors, AP, etc. So I had I was a young teacher and had mostly regular kids. And I noticed pretty quickly that those kids were being ignored. The really bright kids were getting services. They had small classes with the best teachers. The kids that were, on the bottom part of the bell curve were getting services, but a large part of the group were being ignored. They weren't getting the proper college counseling. They weren't getting, as long as they behaved and weren't causing mischief, generally teachers weren't calling their parents. So they got C's and they weren't bothering anybody. They weren't getting into trouble. They were kind of being passed through the system. So right away that became, something that I noticed. And then, I think a second major issue, and kind of in the same theme, was the pacing piece, especially as the world kind of evolved into, everybody having a smartphone and being able to, get an Uber, download a movie, or get food delivered, etc. It didn't make any sense to me that a class was the pace of the classes was prescribed by the teacher. So if you're really bright, you can't work ahead. You're struggling. You're not getting the support you need. You're in the middle. It just doesn't work with today's society. And I think that's one of the major pieces that's been broken for a while that, you tried to take care of in Kansas, with your online initiatives, and we did going all the way back. Why is seat time and, why can't I finish a lesson quicker than somebody else? And those things are just, issues that I think became more apparent during the pandemic as well.
Yeah, and I think now there's a big initiative for the infusion of or incorporation of personalized learning because of that, right? I think people realize that, well, they're home and they're doing these things, and we're not really doing the pacing that we typically do. And I think, there are plenty of teachers who really work hard in their classrooms who have been do that for years. But I think part of your point is that there are some barriers to that because of the system itself. Testing one, there are lots of different pieces that really kind of make it difficult to do that. You have to make sure that, administration is on board, the system itself. So it's really difficult. So having a whole school's philosophy that is really embedded in that makes a huge difference.
Well, if you think about during the pandemic, I think for the first, the remote learning, got blasted, and rightfully so in many arenas. But it was also the first time that parents probably saw how their kids learned, and they saw that, they saw a number of things. Maybe for the first time in their kids' lives, they're being successful because they weren't dealing with bullying. They weren't dealing with the social pressures that come with traditional schools. And parents also might have seen for the first time that school doesn't necessarily have to be 7 hours a day. There is a lot of wasted time that day, and the reason it's 7 hours is childcare. At the end of the day, parents need a place to house their kids. And now the hybrid workforce, I think, also is kind of forcing educators and schools to change because parents are working from home. They have flexibility. They're able to travel more. They can do their workout in the middle of the day and still get their job done. So a lot has happened over the past few years that I think will improve education, but also go back to, what I've thought has been broken for many, many years.
Well, Brent, when we started the online learning program, I had a mentor that always said to me that time in education, time is the constant and learning has been the variable. Mm-hmm. And we really need to flip that. So learning needs to be the constant and time needs to be the variable, so that if it takes you 1 week, it takes you 1 week. If it takes you 2 months, it takes you
100%. I can't agree more. I can't agree more.
So how can we begin to do that? What do you see as some ways to begin to do that?
It's a good question. I mean, so from our perspective, when we developed Xceed, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we just felt that we started with the premise that the system's broken. The system doesn't make any sense. It doesn't correlate to how kids, especially 6th through 12th graders, live today in an on-demand world. It doesn't make sense that I have to eat lunch at 12 if I'm not hungry. Why can't I eat lunch at 11? Why can't I just go to the bathroom when I want? Why do I have no access to my math teacher as soon as that bell rings for 24 hours? So none of those things make sense, in today's world with the way our kids are growing up, so even pre-pandemic, we wanted to create a school where kids own their day, and kids and parents and our school administration developed a personalized daily, monthly, annual schedule for each student, depending on their learning needs and their special talents. We have all different types of students, but most of our kids, I say that they're square pegs in a round hole. And there's thousands of kids in every school district that are square pegs in a round hole for all kinds of reasons. It could be that they're elite athletes that practice their sport twice a day, or entertainers that travel extensively. or kids with ADHD that can't focus in a classroom of 35 to 40 kids for 7 hours a day, or kids with learning differences that are, maybe they're college bound, but they can't handle, the 30, 35, 40 kids in a class, and the lack of personalization, with the teacher. So there are solutions to all of these things. And I think you're seeing, I spoke to a large private school in Orlando recently, and we were guests on another podcast. And they, during the pandemic, they started a whole hybrid component to their school program, along with an online program, along with a traditional program. So I think you're seeing schools, adapt to, more and more schools adapt to the changing atmosphere. Private school my son went to, even after the pandemic, continued with cameras in the classrooms where kids could, work from home remotely if they were sick. I think that schools are adapting, but where most of our kids go to school in the public school systems, it's very hard to change the existing model. In our state, in Florida, there's been a robust online, Florida Virtual School is a pioneer in online learning, and they've been a great partner and a great option for public school families looking for personalization and flexibility, but they don't have the face-to-face component that, I think everybody can agree is necessary for all of us. So I see more and more adaptation, but I just think that there's going to continue to be struggles with the public sectors and truly changing their model that's been the same since, my great grandparents went to school in the early 1900s.
Right. Yes. So what do you see is going to be in our future for like the run of the mill brick and mortar education? What do you see will be in the future?
Well, I think there's been some pretty cool technology that's come out of the pandemic, and we're on it, Zoom, I think that has helped transform a lot of what happens in schools, whether it's flipped classrooms or assemblies or meetings with parents. So I think that's been transformative, for sure. Obviously the online learning piece and more districts and states incorporating online learning into their day. And, there's ways to create hybrid schools where potentially, you have a 7-period day and maybe 2 of your classes are online. And that enables you maybe to leave school and work or intern or volunteer and then work on your online classes on your time, whether it's evenings, weekends, mornings, whatever it may be. And then obviously the growth of the strictly online options. I've just become a huge fan of the hybrid because of the flexibility it gives students. And, this may or may not be incorporated by larger schools moving forward. I don't know. But I do think that what we're doing, can help transform the private school market for sure. And you're seeing, there's other, very large options in the private sector like fusion academies, which, are geared towards more kids with learning differences than what we are, where we're able to meet a larger variety of kids. But, Fusion has 60 plus schools across the United States, and they're, designed to be small, with, 80 to 100 kids. And a lot of online that's incorporated with it as well. So, I think the pandemic is kind of forcing change, and I think a lot of visionaries are seeing that they have to adapt to how kids have changed and how society has changed over the past few years.
I hope to see that this becomes an option in K-12. I feel like it might be happening in higher ed. I think since the pandemic, they're realizing that there's students. I think sometimes classes are optional, but then students realize that's not a good idea. But at least, now they have the option of doing, listening in on their classes from Zoom if they can't get to class. And I think maybe it's there because if they end up getting COVID, they have that option. But I think it's branched out. So I think people are realizing, oh, this actually does work. They can do both. And it actually works okay. And just as you mentioned, it really, addresses different learning styles as well. You mentioned before that you create these personalized learning opportunities for students. Are students part of those decisions as well?
100%. So we develop personalized learning plans, and the team that develops it includes the student. So it's the student, the parents, and the head of school. Sometimes it's an outside counselor or psychologist that the child might be working with as well. But a lot of kids aren't morning people, so I happen to be a morning person. I'm up at 5 a.m. every morning. I would love to have my day done by noon. And then go, and you can look at all of the sleep research with teenagers and just drive by, go by at 6 a.m. at the bus stops, and you see these kids. I drove my son to high school for 4 years, and he'd sleep every single day because he was up until midnight doing homework. And then he has to get to school by, 7:15. And it's, you're creating a culture of zombies. So there's kids that are morning people. There's kids that aren't. There's kids that want to, of ours that want to go work in the afternoon or intern or practice. There's families, that travel extensively, whether it's for work or pleasure. In a traditional model, that doesn't work. I mean, when I ran traditional schools and you came to me and said, hey, we're Brazilian and we want to go to Carnival for 10 days. So if that doesn't correspond with the school calendar, that's not fair to our teachers to have to create a whole, special program for your kids during those 10 days, go on vacation when the school's off. But with our model, go when, that's fine. You can access our courses virtually. You can set up Calendly appointments with our teachers and have, Microsoft Teams sessions with them while you're gone. So it totally works for us, but the kids are very much involved in that process.
Yeah, they would have to be, right? And really, I see more and more that it's all about choice, giving those kids those opportunities to really personalize their own learning experience. I see it happening in K-12, but again, it's not systemic, right? It's more about those teachers who are really making it happen, but it's not always based on this overall philosophy of the system.
It's a sheer number thing. I mean, you're always going to have the pro superstar teacher that's going to go above and beyond. But if you have a load of 200 students, it just makes it very, very difficult to do that. Especially the way schools are tracked by ability, it's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, we've always spoken about those silver linings of the pandemic. So perhaps what you've started so long ago in this philosophy that of education, perhaps this could be something that evolves. I would imagine it would take a while, but I mean, I think there's hope.
Oh, I agree. And I think it's interesting now. I think I read in the Wall Street Journal the other day how more and more companies are trying to force their workers to come back
Yeah, I heard
to the
that.
office, and
Yes.
and there's a lot of resistance. So it'll be interesting to see how that, kind of evolves. But I think people realize that, listen, I can get my job done. My 8 hour, 10 hour day, I can chunk it how I want to, and still get my job done, and jump on Microsoft Teams or Zoom and still be as productive as ever. And sure, there's value with seeing your colleagues face to face, but there's a lot of wasted time too. I mean, it's great to know about your vacation and about how your kids are doing and all of that, but it takes into account, it's wasting part of your 8 hours, and then the commute to and from work, where you could be productive. And I just think people are saying, listen, I'm more productive at home. And if I'm more productive at home, my kids could be more productive in this, hybrid manner as well, and do more things.
The hybrid does seem to be the best of both worlds because you get a little bit of each. But Brent, I want to go back just a little bit to your teachers. I'm curious about a couple of things. Number one, I noticed that several of my friends that are teachers, not all of them, but quite a few, after the pandemic, they wanted to go to virtual. Are you seeing the same shortages in finding teachers as public schools are, or are people more attracted to virtual now? What's going on there?
It's a good question. There's a definite problem with teachers in this country. For all kinds of reasons, not to get political, but it's a very tough time to be a teacher for all kinds of reasons. As a result, there was a shortage before the pandemic. There's a shortage now. Ultimately, if it's like anything else. If you pay more, you're probably not going to have a shortage. But, I think that what attracts people to our either hybrid or virtual teaching, I think there's a number of factors. So in our hybrid schools, our teachers are on site, and our students are on site, but the curriculum is delivered online. So what does that mean for the teachers? It means there's minimal lesson planning because the curriculum is already done for you. And most of the assignments and assessments are auto-graded. So there's minimal grading. So the typical teacher that on the weekends is, it's not paper-based anymore, but is doing a lot of grading at home or, after work or on the weekends, not having to do that is attractive. And then at our schools, we don't have cafeteria duty, bus duty, bathroom duty, these types of stuff that, is just not an attractive part of the job.
And discipline issues. You typically don't have discipline.
We have minimal discipline issues, so you're not dealing with that. So that in turn makes it a more attractive, job. So yes, there's a shortage of teachers. It's harder for us to find teachers, especially in the areas that were already short. The high-end math and science are very, very difficult to find at any time, but especially now. But we really try. When we conceptualize this school, we wanted to change the paradigm of the teacher role into more of a mentor, motivator, coach, tutor, than the sage on the stage that's in control of every aspect of your learning, and also get them away from having to do, designing a school to where they're not going to have to sit out that carpool duty in 95-degree Florida heat every afternoon. Because our kids are coming and going, there's no carpool. Our kids are coming and going every few hours, and we don't have, traditional bells. So there's no carpool in the morning, carpool at night. Our kids eat lunch when they're hungry. So there's no lunch duty. We don't have a cafeteria. Kids either, have food delivered or they bring their own. So it just, the job, the part of the teacher job description that makes life very difficult for a lot of them, we've eliminated off the top.
And the teachers that apply to your school, I assume they know that it's going to be a different environment. Have they fit in easily and made that transition easily?
So good question. So a lot of our teachers tend to be younger as a result of, I think just, from a understanding student information systems, learning management systems, online learning, how to communicate with families this way. Most younger people, I'd say 30 and younger, have taken an online class, either in high school or college. They understand it, they understand how it works, where people my age don't as much. So, we tend to attract a younger teacher that gets this, that understands the concept. You get 35 and above, you're more set in your ways and you're more apt to do things like you did when you were growing up. But the professional development piece is, I think in any educational institution is obviously huge, but it's bigger for us because we have to, truly onboard in a way that changes the paradigm of how you normally would teach.
Right. Absolutely. What does it take to be a successful teacher in an environment like yours?
You have to be willing to think differently. You have to be adaptable. You have to be willing to put in a lot of steps during the day because you're walking constantly, checking in on students. You have to be proactive when communicating with kids and parents rather than reactive, because our parents can see through our learning management system in real time what their pace is, what their grade is, how much time they spent on the assignment, how much time what they're when they're taking their assessments, how they did on their assessments. So that, they truly have to be proactive in communicating with their families as a result of that.
Right. And they have to communicate in the new ways.
In the new ways, exactly.
Yeah, not the traditional ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nobody answers the phone anymore, and nobody checks their email anymore. So
right.
you have to figure out what the best way to communicate with your stakeholders.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
that's great.
I just think this forward thinking from so long ago, the innovation, your entrepreneurship and, courage to do so is really inspiring. And, either learning, taking some takeaways from this, either for, the K-12 public or even for all of these different opportunities that do exist for, online hybrid learning, is really beneficial for all. So.
Right. And we can all learn so much from the path that you have set out for us. We can learn so much from you. And I hope that our brick and mortar schools are listening and learning and adapting along the way as well.
And, and also being able to sit back and say, instead of saying, no, we can't do that, thinking, well, why not? We always just say, no, we don't do it that way. And you really have to be reflective and say, well, well, why not? Why can't we? What needs to be, and a lot of time there are those barriers that come from, the state or, from other, the districts, but are there ways to get people together to have conversations, to think outside the box and move things forward for students? And I think having students part of these conversations, I think is really important as well. Help make that change. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for bringing to all of this to us.
I appreciate it. Very nice to meet you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you for being our guest today. And we look forward to watching and seeing what's next with you, Brent.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.